Hey, what's going on, everyone? In this video, I'm going to tell you my opinion on which is the best Spanish book to start if you are a Spanish beginner. And I'm not just going to tell you this as a idea. Like, these are books that are very popular, and I have them all. And because I have them all and have used them all for the most part, I'll be able to express exactly why you should start with the book that I recommend. Now, if you've been following my videos for a while, a lot of people are going to think that I like work for Complete Spanish Step by Step or something, or McGraw-Hill, but I don't. This is really my opinion as someone who is actively learning the language, Spanish, and I just want to save you some money. Now, the first book that I want to talk about is Madrigal's Magic Key to Spanish. Now, I did purchase this book, but knowing what I know about the language now, I created a separate video that explains the 3 reasons why you shouldn't start with this book. Another book that's very popular is Complete Spanish Grammar. And so if you purchase this book, you'll think it's a beginner book. But I don't believe that, based on the books that I have, I don't believe that any book that Gilda Nissenberg has in this series is a beginner book. It's a great book. In fact, it's this book right here, Complete Spanish Grammar, is the book that I'm going to start my studies with, continue my studies with next year. But for several reasons, it's not a beginner book. And I'll just show you chapter 1, the inside of chapter 1, that will explain why. Let's go to chapter 1, the present tense. And she does a great job of explaining the present tense, right? She tells you what the present tense is, but then they start with this long list of verbs. But more importantly, if you look at the first exercise in this chapter, it's in Spanish. If you have no idea what the Spanish language looks like or sounds like, this is not for you. You're going to look at this and you'll be like, huh? And maybe your idea is to just introduce the language as it is and not get you looking at English whatsoever, but it's not a good book because of this. It's not a good book for beginners. But for me, someone who knows the language and have studied the language, of course, you can start there. But don't give this to someone as a gift, for example, as a beginner book for Spanish. Here's exercise 2, practice writing Spanish, right? I prepare the dinner. Like, if you don't know the subject pronoun I or prepare or dinner, like, you're immediately going to be like, huh? No, and you're going to give up. So don't start with this book just because of this example whatsoever. I mean, in general. There's another book that you can find. It's called Complete Spanish All in One. Now, this again is by Gilda Nissenberg, and this book takes, I think, 5 of her books and put it all into this one book. Again, this is a book that I have, and I eventually will go through the book because my theory is that I just need to see the same input over and over and over again, similar concepts grammatically over and over again. But this book is made of many of her books. And so if you go into the first chapter of this book, she goes into spelling, pronunciation, and punctuation. But more importantly, if you go into the first exercise, right, she wants you to go over where accent marks are supposed to be placed. That's not something a beginner wants to start with, right? And if you go into the next exercise, she wants you to add the appropriate punctuation. So she wants you in this first exercise to start writing the language correctly before you even have an understanding of the language. And there's several more exercises. So again, exercise 1-3. This is chapter 1. Exercise 1-3. She wants you to reword the sentences with the appropriate spelling and punctuation. So again, this is not a beginner book. This is someone who understands the language, and they can go into this exercise and they can do it without any frustration, right? Alicia, Luisa, and Arin son disciplinadas, trabajadoras, pacientes, and eficientes. Like, no, if you don't know Spanish, you don't start with knowing the sentence about Alisa Luisa and Irene, knowing that this is missing the comma. So don't start here either. So I went over Madrigal. I went over, what is this? Complete Spanish All in One. I went over Complete Spanish Grammar. And there's several other books that I have, but these are the books I believe that are like the ones that people look at and like, oh, is it a beginner book? So all that said, the book that I recommend that you start with is, again, Complete Spanish Step by Step. I have the book. I have the physical copy of the book. And there's several reasons why I, again, recommend this book to be the book that you start with, which is in the same video that I talked about Madrigal's Spanish. And this book is, again, is excellent. I've read a lot of Spanish books, and I've learned so much from this book that were like questions in my head after coming from other books. So really quickly, let's just talk about some of the things that you will be able to do upon completing your reading and listening to Complete Spanish Step by Step. So most importantly, the book does deliver on what it says, which is Spanish mastery in 30 graduated steps. Now they call it graduated steps because each chapter is a different focus. And within each of those chapters, right, there's sufficient vocabulary that you don't necessarily need the cognates to guess what you're learning. There's so much vocabulary in here, and not to overwhelm you, but this is just so that you can understand like the article la versus the article el. But there's so much vocabulary just in the first chapter, and the exercises kind of get you accustomed to that. So you'll have a bunch of vocabulary by the time you are done with this book. And if you haven't figured it out, it's the vocabulary that are the bricks to your home. What's the point of knowing a sentence if you can't fill in the blank with a word that you want to say? So while it may seem like vocabulary is something that you can overlook, you can't, because the vocabulary is what allows you to expand the things that you can say, and of course the things that you will be able to understand when you hear the word being said. The second thing that's important is that by the time you are done with chapter 2, you come across a reading comprehension. And as reading comprehension is like important because now you are getting used to reading Spanish in context. And then each chapter after chapter 2, there's a reading comprehension. There's chapter 3's reading comprehension. There's chapters 4. So you get used to reading the Spanish language in context. And of course, once you know how to read, you open up a whole new world for yourself. You can begin reading books in Spanish at your appropriate level. You could begin reading subtitles of telenovelas or movies and actually start enjoying the movie. You could begin reading signs in airports and on roads so that you will actually know where you're going and won't get lost. And there's so much more, like even quickly thumbing through YouTube and reading the titles to the videos becomes much more enjoyable. Like reading is that important to opening up your future possibilities with the language. The other thing, once you get into verbs, you get all the uses of the verb. So instead of only understanding the usted form of a verb, you understand the tú or the informal use of the verb. And if you are studying for a trip to Spain, you understand the vosotros use of the verb. So those three things in itself sets itself apart. And another thing that's important to point out about the book is the use of the subjunctive, right? This book emphasizes the use of the subjunctive by introducing chapter 13, the present subjunctive, and then it enforces chapter 13, the present subjunctive, and it has an entire chapter dedicated to the command use, which is essentially the use of the subjunctive. And by the time you get to the end of the book, you are going to understand in their own chapters other forms of the subjunctive. And so all of this to say, like if I had the time, I would go through each reason why this book is like so good at introducing the beginner to the language that this video will go on for forever, but I don't want to do that. Oh, and by the way, by the time you are through the book, and if you read it a couple of times, because I recommend staying with one resource until you master it, you will know over 500 different verbs. You know how to conjugate them all. And you know all the other vocabulary that this book has, because there's a lot of key vocabulary before each of the reading comprehensions, like all of these nouns here. And if you go to another, like there's all the vocabulary for numbers. There's more vocabulary in this section as well. So it's definitely the resource that you can study from so that you can get a vast understanding of the language. One thing that's probably a question in a lot of people's head as you start going through, like, hey, why do I see easy Spanish step by step and advanced Spanish step by step? Like, what's the difference? Well, in short, Complete Spanish Step by Step is made of both books, Easy Spanish Step by Step and then Advanced Spanish Step by Step. The audio version of the book, I recommend both. The audio version and the physical version has the same contents as the physical copy of the book, but more importantly, it's not just the author reading the book as if it's an audiobook. It's the author that's actually challenging you to go through each of the exercises. It has pauses to allow you to think, and it just does a really good job of adding their own little narrations and tidbit to kind of keep you going. So all in all, if you're going to look for the best Spanish book to begin your Spanish language learning journey, you start with Complete Spanish Step by Step, and you also get the audio version, and you go through one chapter of the physical book, follow it up with the audio version, one chapter of the audio version if you've never heard the language spoken before, so that you are getting hit metaphorically with both the physical copy and the audio version at the same time. And it will be a great way to fast track everything that you need to understand about the language for your future studies, for when you start picking up books like Complete Spanish Grammar and Complete Spanish All-in-One. So hopefully this video was helpful. I wanted to make it because I was once the person that was looking for the best book to begin. And now that I've been on this journey for quite some time, I can confidently back up my recommendation that Complete Spanish Step by Step is the best book that I know about to start with if you're going to start your Spanish journey. That said, if you also have been studying Spanish for a while and you know of another book that has helped you, please feel free to add it into the comments of this video, because I'm always looking for ideas and information to bring my audience. If then I guess that's all I have for this video. Until the next video, peace.